There's something I've been carrying for over 40 years, and until recently, I didn't realize just how heavy it had become. It's not something you can see. It doesn't show up on a medical chart or in a blood test, but it's there, quiet, persistent, like a soft ache deep inside. It's regret, not the kind that fades after a few bad days or a missed appointment. I'm talking about the kind that settles into your bones, the kind that whispers in the early hours of the morning when the house is still and the world is asleep. You see, there are moments in my life I wish I could go back and change. Words I should have said, time I should have made, people I should have held a little closer. And maybe you feel that too. Maybe you've looked back and thought, if only I had taken that call. If only I had visited one more time. If only I had said, I'm sorry, before it was too late. You're not alone. Truly, you're not. I've lived through the sting of missed chances. I've woken up in the middle of the night, heart heavy, replaying scenes from decades ago, conversations I can't redo, choices I can't undo. But here's what I've learned, and what I want to share with you today. While we cannot rewrite the past, we can choose what we carry forward. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop punishing ourselves for being human, for not knowing then what we know now. 1-1. When regret finds you in the quiet, it's funny how the quiet moments are the loudest. People think regret comes crashing in like a storm, but for me, it usually shows up when the world has gone still, when the dishes are done, the sun's gone down, and the only thing left is my own breath and memory. I was sitting on my porch a few weeks ago, early morning, still dark, just the faintest orange on the horizon. I had my coffee in one hand, and in the other, nothing, just stillness. That's when a memory from almost 50 years ago crept in, like it was waiting for silence to slip through the cracks. It wasn't even a big memory. It was me, 27 years old, on a payphone, telling my father I couldn't come home that weekend. He had just had surgery. He wanted me there. I was busy. Work, deadlines, all that important stuff. I told him I'd come next week. Next week never came. He passed 2 days later. That memory? It never left me. It doesn't scream, but it never really stopped whispering either. And the thing is, I know he loved me. I know I loved him. But I still carry that ache, that I should have been there, that one decision I can't undo. If you're anything like me, maybe you have a few of those quiet moments too. Maybe they visit you when you're folding laundry, driving home from the grocery store, or lying awake at night staring at the ceiling. And here's what I've come to realize. Regret doesn't always come from massive, life-altering decisions. Sometimes it's the small things, the phone call we didn't make, the visit we postponed, the words we held back. And what makes it harder as we get older is that we understand now what we didn't understand then, how precious time is, how rare second chances really are. You can't go back, I know that. Believe me, I've tried in my mind more times than I can count. But maybe the goal isn't to go back. Maybe it's just to make peace with where we are. Regret finds us in the quiet because quiet is honest. But you know what else can find us there? Grace. And grace is softer than guilt. It doesn't demand, it invites. So if you're sitting in the quiet today and regret comes knocking, don't be afraid to answer. But don't let it stay too long. Just let it speak. Listen for a while. And then begin the slow, gentle work of releasing it. 2. The regret of words left unsaid. Some things are hard to say when we're young. We think we have time. We think people will always be around. We assume there will be another day, another moment, a better mood, a more perfect setting. But that day doesn't always come. I remember when my mother fell ill, the kind of illness that shifts the air in the room. We didn't talk about it directly. She didn't want to. She just kept saying, "I'm fine." And I let her. I let her protect me from the truth. I wish now that I had sat beside her, taken her hand, and simply said, "I'm scared too, Mom, but I love you, and I'm here." I wish I had asked her what she needed. I wish I had told her how much of who I am came from her quiet strength. But I didn't. I kept it all inside. I showed up. I ran errands. I brought her soup. I held her purse in the waiting room. But I never told her what my heart wanted her to know. And then one day, she was gone. And those words, still inside me, had nowhere to go. If you're listening right now and you have someone you still can talk to, say the thing. Tell them you forgive them. Tell them you're sorry. Tell them you miss them. Tell them you love them, even if it's awkward, even if it makes your voice shake. Because it's the unsaid that haunts us more than the things we said wrong. I've said a lot of foolish things in my life, but the ones that echo loudest are the ones I never let out. And if the person is gone, then write it down. Say it out loud anyway. The heart doesn't need an audience to heal. It just needs permission. Sometimes I sit on the edge of my bed and speak to her softly. I tell her about the grandkids. I thank her for the way she taught me to pray. I say the things I couldn't back then. And though the ache never fully disappears, something does shift. The silence begins to feel less sharp. The words begin to feel heard, even if it's just by the stars. If you're still carrying words left unsaid, you're not alone. But you don't have to carry them forever. Today might be the day you let them go, not to forget, but to honor. Because love doesn't end at goodbye. And sometimes saying the words now is the most loving thing we can do, for them and for ourselves. 3. The weight of being a parent. There's a kind of regret that only parents understand. It's not about one big moment. It's about all the little ones. The evenings you came home too tired to listen. The mornings you rushed out the door without noticing. They needed you to notice. The years you thought discipline mattered more than tenderness. I've got a son. He's a grown man now with kids of his own. But when I look at him, sometimes I don't see the man. Sometimes I see the boy who used to line up his toy soldiers on the living room floor. The boy who used to call out, "Dad, watch this," every 5 minutes. And too many times I didn't. I was tired. I was stressed. I was in my head. I told him, "Not now." Or I watched without really seeing. Now I see. Now I'd give anything for just 5 minutes on that living room floor. There was one day, I'll never forget it. He was maybe 12. We had a fight. Nothing unusual, just teenage stuff. But I was hard on him. Too hard. I wanted him to toughen up. I didn't want him to become soft in a hard world. But looking back, I wasn't teaching him strength. I was just passing on my own fear. We parents don't get it all right. We try. God knows we try. But we are human, and humans mess up. If you're a parent who carries guilt, I want to tell you this. Your regret is a sign that you loved well, that you cared deeply, that you wanted to get it right. That matters. And here's something else I've learned. No matter how old your child is, it's never too late to say, "I'm sorry." I did. One quiet afternoon, I called my son and I told him everything. He didn't need me to be perfect. He just needed to know I saw it too. That I knew where I missed the mark. That I loved him enough to admit I'd fallen short. That conversation didn't erase the past, but it healed something in both of us. So if you're carrying the weight of being a parent, the fear you didn't do enough, the guilt you weren't always present, breathe with me here. You loved, you tried, and there is still time to love better. Let's use it. 4. Carrying regret in marriage. There's a kind of silence that lives between two people who've been together a long time. My wife and I have been married for over 40 years. We've shared so much: holidays, grief, laughter, disappointment, bills, hospital visits, new beginnings, old patterns. And within all those years, there are things I wish I had done differently. Not grand mistakes, not infidelity or betrayal, but the kind of regret that grows slowly. The moments I didn't listen when she needed to be heard. The times I brushed off her fears because I didn't know what to do with them. I thought I was being strong. I thought I was protecting her by keeping my own emotions tucked away and hers at arm's length. But really, I was just hiding. There's one memory that always comes back to me. It was during one of the hardest seasons of her life. Her mother had just passed, and I didn't know how to be present for her grief. I thought fixing things would help, so I offered solutions. She didn't need that. She needed a hand on her back. She needed silence that felt safe. But I wasn't there, not in the way she needed. Now, years later, I've told her that. I've apologized, not for being a bad husband, but for not understanding what she needed at the time. She forgave me long before I forgave myself. If you're in a relationship, whether it's been 5 years or 50, you know that love doesn't prevent regret. Even in love, we hurt one another. We miss moments. We misunderstand. And sometimes the deepest wounds are the ones we never spoke aloud. But here's the gift of growing older together. Time doesn't just give us more years. It gives us more chances. More chances to ask questions, to listen deeper, to say, "I'm sorry for the times I didn't show up the way you needed." I've learned that saying sorry doesn't make you weak in love. It makes you trustworthy. And choosing to try again, after all the history, after all the old habits, that's real strength. So if you carry regret in your marriage, like I have, know this: your willingness to see it and speak it may be the very thing that brings you closer again. There's still time to hold each other better, to listen softer, to love with more patience than pride. And that is a gift worth unwrapping every single day. 5. The turning point: a morning walk. I didn't expect a simple question on a morning walk to change me, but it did. It was early spring, still cold enough to see your breath, but warm enough to walk without hunching your shoulders. I was walking with an old friend, George. We've known each other since high school. We don't talk much about feelings. We talk about weather, baseball, grandkids, cholesterol. But that morning, something was different. He asked, "What would you do differently if you knew you only had 5 years left?" Not in a dramatic way. He just tossed it out, like a rock skipping across the water. But it hit me hard. I stopped walking. 5 years. I hadn't thought about time that way. We're always acting like we have more time to fix things, to speak up, to change course. But what if we don't? That question stayed with me long after the walk was over. I sat with it all day. I even wrote it on a sticky note and put it on the fridge. Every time I reached for a glass of water, it stared back at me. 5 years. What would you do? I realized I'd spend less time holding on to old wounds, less time waiting for the perfect moment to make a call, less time worrying about what people think, and more time making peace with others and with myself. That question made regret feel urgent, not as a burden, but as a doorway into what's still possible, because we don't know how much time we have, but we do have now. And I want to spend what's left not weighed down by old mistakes, but lifted up by what I've learned from them. So here's my question for you. What would you do if you had 5 years left? Or 1 year? Or 6 months? Not to scare you, but to free you. Because we don't have forever to make peace, but we do have today. And that might be enough to begin. 6. Grace is not forgetting. It's forgiving. For a long time, I thought letting go meant forgetting. I thought that if I forgave myself, it meant I was excusing the pain I may have caused, that it somehow erased the responsibility or minimized what I had done. But I've come to believe something very different. Grace is not about forgetting. Grace is about forgiving, and forgiving doesn't mean denying the truth. It means choosing to see yourself through a lens that includes both your failures and your humanity. I once sat down and wrote a letter to the version of myself who made the choices I regret most. I didn't plan to. It just happened. I wrote, "You were scared. You didn't know how to ask for help. You thought being strong meant being silent. You didn't see the ripple effect. You were just trying to stay afloat." As I wrote, something shifted. I started to see that man, not as someone who should have known better, but as someone doing the best he could with what he had at the time. That's not a justification. That's perspective. I still hold myself accountable, but I also offer myself compassion. And that has changed everything. Because regret is not just about the past. It's about how we carry the past into the present. And if I keep carrying it like a punishment, I'll never be free to live fully now. So, I ask you, can you offer yourself grace? Not to forget, not to erase, but to forgive the version of you that didn't have all the tools, all the clarity, all the peace you may have now? Grace doesn't come naturally. It takes practice. Some days I still argue with myself. But the more I practice grace, the lighter I become. Not because I've forgotten, but because I've finally stopped fighting with who I used to be. You're not just your regrets. You're also the growth that came from them. And that matters more than you know. Number 9. Conversations I finally had. There are conversations I avoided for years, decades even. I told myself they were better left alone, that too much time had passed, that reopening those old doors would just bring more pain. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was afraid of rejection, afraid of awkward silence, afraid of hearing something I didn't want to hear, or worse, not hearing anything at all. But mostly, I was afraid of being vulnerable. There was one person in particular I hadn't spoken to in almost 10 years. My sister. We used to be close when we were kids. Thick as thieves, they used to say. But as adults, things got complicated. It started small, a disagreement over how to care for our aging mother, a few words exchanged in the heat of stress, then silence, then years. At first, I told myself she didn't care, that she didn't miss me, so why should I miss her? But I did. Every holiday, every birthday. Every time I drove past her old neighborhood. And what I realized, slowly, painfully, was that the regret wasn't just about what happened between us. It was about what didn't happen after. The calls I didn't make, the apologies I never offered, the olive branch I never extended. One morning, I woke up and said to myself, if I don't do this now, when? So I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking. I stared at the number for 5 whole minutes, but eventually I hit a call. She answered. Same voice, just a little older, a little softer. I didn't launch into a long explanation. I just said, I miss you, and I'm sorry for how long it's been. There was a pause, maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like forever. Then she said, I've missed you too. And just like that, we were back, not back to who we were as kids, but back in connection. Back in truth. Back in something that felt like peace. That one conversation healed a part of me I didn't even realize was still bleeding. Here's what I want to tell you. If there's someone you still think about, even if it's been years, it's not too late. I'm not saying every call will end with forgiveness. Some people may not be ready. Some may not respond, but you will know that you tried. You will know that you extended grace. You will know that you faced your fear and acted anyway. And that changes you, regardless of how they respond. Regret is often the space between the heart and the voice, between feeling something and saying it, between wishing and acting. But that space doesn't have to stay empty. You can fill it with honesty, with humility, with hope. Since that call with my sister, I've made a few more. Old friends. A cousin I hadn't spoken to since the funeral. Even my old boss, the one I left on bad terms years ago. Each conversation didn't fix everything, but it brought light where there had once been shadows. If you're wondering whether you should reach out, let me just say this. If it's on your heart, it's probably for a reason. And if there's even a small chance it could bring healing for them or for you, it's worth it. Sometimes the most powerful way to let go of regret is to open your mouth, speak from the heart, and simply begin. 8. Living the rest of my life lightly. You know, I used to think that getting older meant carrying more memories, more responsibilities, more weight from the past. But lately, I've started to believe the opposite might be true. Maybe the real wisdom in aging is learning what to set down. Not out of denial, but out of understanding. Not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered. And it taught us what it needed to. I've spent years carrying certain regrets like they were some kind of debt I owed to the past. Like if I held onto the guilt long enough, maybe it would prove I cared. Or maybe it would somehow balance the scales. But guilt doesn't pay old debts. It just builds new walls. And I don't want any more walls in my life. I want space. I want light. Now I try to live differently. Not in big dramatic ways. I haven't sold everything to travel the world or written some best-selling memoir, but I've started doing something that, for me, is just as important. I've started being present, fully, softly, on purpose. Like when my granddaughter sits next to me and tells me about her day at school. And I look her in the eye, not just nod while thinking about my to-do list. Or when my wife tells me a story I've already heard 3 times. And instead of saying, "You told me that," I smile and let her tell it again. Because I know sometimes we just need to be heard. I've started walking slower, eating slower, breathing slower. Not because I have no energy, but because I've learned to savor. And maybe that's one of the hidden gifts of letting go of regret. It frees up your hands so you can hold what's in front of you with more gentleness. I used to look back too much. I'd play old scenes in my head like a broken film reel. But these days, I look forward. Not with the pressure to prove anything, but with curiosity. What kind of grandfather can I be now? What kind of neighbor? What kind of friend? I think about the time I have left, whether it's 5 years or 20, and I want it to be light, not empty, just light. Light enough for laughter, for kindness, for long, slow dinners with people I love, for forgiveness, for peace. And that kind of life doesn't come from pretending I've never made mistakes. It comes from finally accepting that I have, and choosing not to let those mistakes define my story. There's a kind of grace that doesn't erase the past, but surrounds it, like a soft blanket around an old scar. It reminds you that yes, you've been through something, but you're still here, still learning, still worthy of love. So now, when I lie down at night, I try not to replay regrets. I say thank you for one more day, for another chance to be gentle with myself and with others. And if tomorrow comes, I'll try again. Not perfectly, but lightly, with grace. Because I may be older, but I'm not done growing. And every day I choose to live with open hands instead of a heavy heart. I feel a little more free. So, here we are. You've walked with me through memories I rarely say out loud, the missed chances, the quiet guilt, the apologies that came too late, or just in time. And if you've stayed with me this far, I want to thank you. Truly. Because talking about regret isn't easy. Living with it is even harder. But naming it, facing it, that's how we loosen its grip. That's how we take our power back. Not to control the past, but to live fully in the present. Maybe today you remembered someone. Maybe you saw a version of yourself you haven't spoken to in years. Maybe there were tears, or silence, or just the simple ache of recognition. That's okay. That's human. You're allowed to feel what you feel. You're allowed to wish things had gone differently. But you are also allowed to forgive yourself. You are allowed to grow, to begin again. Even now, especially now. I believe this deeply. We are more than the worst things we've done, or the most painful things we've endured. We are more than missed calls and closed doors. We are not just our regrets. We are our repairs. And we are our redemptions too. So tonight, when the house is quiet and the memories start to stir, I hope you won't turn away. I hope you'll sit beside them, just for a moment, and whisper, I see you. I've carried you. But I don't need to carry all of you anymore. Let grace have a seat at your table. Let it speak louder than guilt. Let it remind you that every breath you take is still a chance to show up with love. For yourself and for the people who are still here. And if no one's told you this in a while, let me say it now. You are not too late. You are not alone, and you are still worthy of peace. So if this message touched something in your heart, write just one word in the comments below. Grace. Let's remind each other. We don't have to carry it all. We can carry it together. Or better yet, we can start to let it go. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.